We have new insight tonight on what happened inside a group home in Mesa where a 14-year-old girl went missing at the end of January.
She was just 14, a creative soul who loved pink and K-pop with a future full of dreams. This year, she should have been celebrating her 15th birthday. Instead, her story raises urgent questions about the safety of vulnerable children. A group home with over 30 missing kids, a family left waiting for answers, and critical evidence gone without explanation. What happened exposes a deeper issue affecting Indigenous communities, one that too often goes unnoticed. It's time to look closer and ask why this keeps happening. The following is a case that raised more questions than answers and pulled back the curtain on a system meant to protect her. This is the story of Emily Pike, a quiet soul with a creative streak, a radiant smile, and a deep love for anything pink or sparkly. She dreamed of someday walking across a college campus, probably wearing glittery sneakers. From a young age, she stood out not for being loud, but for her warmth and the kind of laughter that made people smile even if they didn't know the joke. Her family remembers her as lighthearted, affectionate, and charmingly offbeat. She loved drawing, obsessing over K-pop, and playing Roblox with the kind of seriousness most people reserve for taxes. Her teachers said she was bright and eager, and her family shared that she often talked about one day becoming a veterinarian, probably the kind who'd name every animal in her care. Though Emily was brought up within her tribal roots, life eventually took a turn, and she was placed under the care of tribal social services in a group home. That part of her story, the role of tribal child welfare, would later raise important questions. While the reasons for her placement remain private, it's clear her family was never far. Her grandmother, Agatha Key, still calls her my one and only granddaughter, with a mix of love and heartbreak. Her uncle, Alfred Pike Jr., has spoken publicly, echoing the family's unwavering resolve to uncover the truth and ensure that Emily's story doesn't end without answers. Here's how the tragedy unfolded, chronologically and without the gaps that plague the investigation.
But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. At some point, though the specifics still remain unclear, Emily was relocated from her home community on the reservation to a group home in Mesa, Arizona, roughly 3 hours away. According to scattered reports, tribal social services had custody of her during this period, though the circumstances surrounding that involvement haven't been publicly shared. It's believed that the move may have been made in an effort to give her access to mental health services that weren't available locally. Whether that decision was based on real need or administrative convenience, we don't know. What we do know is that this move placed Emily far from the familiarity of her family and community, and no one's quite sure how long she had been there before she disappeared. Even from that distance, Emily didn't allow her connection to home to fade. She stayed in close contact with her family, especially her two cousins, the ones she jokingly called the trio. The bond between them was deep, built on shared laughs and sibling-like loyalty. Just before she vanished, she told them she'd be back on the reservation soon, within a few weeks. They were already making plans, little things like shopping, hanging out, just being kids again. There was joy in that anticipation, a simple, shared happiness that gave them all something to look forward to. None of them could have imagined those plans would never take place. On the evening of January 27, 2025, the group home where Emily had been staying welcomed visitors from a local church. With more people than usual inside the home, and the natural distraction that comes with hosting guests, it appears that Emily quietly slipped out during the commotion. She was last seen around 7:45 p.m., walking near the intersection of Mesa Drive and Melrose Road. Whether that sighting came from a person on the street or a security camera hasn't been clearly confirmed. But either way, that was the last known moment she was seen. After that, the trail went cold. Her absence wasn't noticed right away. It was later that night when staff at the group home realized she was missing. A report was filed and authorities were contacted. Almost immediately, her case was classified as a runaway. Emily had a known history of leaving the facility and returning later, 3 or 4 instances according to records. That pattern heavily influenced how her disappearance was initially handled. There wasn't panic. There wasn't urgency. There was just an assumption that she'd be back, just like all the other times. Maybe they believed it was routine. Maybe they thought she just needed space. But the problem with treating someone's absence as predictable is that one day it isn't, and that's the day that matters most. Shortly after Emily was reported missing, officers from the Mesa Police Department began their response. Her photo was shared across social platforms. Her name was added to both state and national missing person systems, and printed flyers were quickly distributed throughout the nearby areas. The road she was last seen near was fairly busy, lined with gas stations, local businesses, and restaurants. So it was reasonable to believe someone might have noticed her or remembered which direction she walked. In coordination with group home staff, officers checked the surrounding area, hoping to piece together her movements that evening. Whether any leads were gathered from this effort hasn't been made clear to the public. The days that followed carried a quiet tension. While the official stance still leaned toward the idea that Emily had voluntarily left and would come back in time, just like before, those outside the case started to feel less sure. The more time passed without contact, the harder it became to hold on to that belief. Because regardless of past behavior, Emily was still a young teen. She likely had no access to money, and no one could say for sure if she had a phone or a clear plan. She was miles away from home, in a large city she may not have known well. And unlike movies where runaway teens somehow land on their feet, real life doesn't often come with a map or a safety net. So the question became painfully simple. If she wasn't headed somewhere, then where exactly did she go?
In situations like these, it's often expected that runaways eventually return once they run low on resources or realize leaving wasn't the best choice. Sometimes they have support from someone else, which can influence their decisions and paths. This kind of pattern may have been considered here as well. One of the most painful aspects revealed in this case was the delay in informing Emily's family. This is one of those unfortunate situations where each new detail seems to deepen the heartbreak. According to Arizona law, authorities must notify families within 24 hours when a child in state care goes missing. However, since Emily was under the supervision of the San Carlos Apache Tribal Social Services rather than the state, that legal requirement did not strictly apply, leading to a breakdown in communication. Instead of directly contacting her family, the local authorities waited for the group home to reach out to Emily's case manager, who was then responsible for informing her relatives. Officials described this procedure as standard practice, which some might interpret as a way to pass the responsibility along. Ultimately, it was a full week before her case manager finally told Emily's mother, "Emily has been missing for a week and we don't know where she is." Unsurprisingly, this left Emily's family trapped in agonizing uncertainty. That entire week, the most critical window for searching and raising awareness, had quietly slipped away through no fault of their own, leaving them powerless during a time when every moment counted. Once Emily was reported missing, her family sprang into action, determined to find answers despite the precious time already lost. They reached out to local law enforcement, tribal social services, and made use of every available means to spread the word. People from her community back on the reservation rallied as well, sharing updates on social media and posting flyers in hopes of a lead. Still, their efforts were understandably limited, slowed by the late start and the fact that Emily had last been seen more than 3 hours away from home, a vast distance when every moment counts. As days turned into weeks with no sign of her return, the initial hope that Emily was simply a runaway began to wane. Then, the case took a sorrowful and sudden turn. A memo from the 𝐂𝐲𝐬 County Sheriff's Office, located about 80 miles from Mesa, was leaked online. Intended solely for internal circulation, its public release shocked many in the community. A brief heads up: The contents of this document are quite distressing. The memo described the discovery of human remains on February 14, 2025, near milepost 277 along Highway 60. This stretch of mountainous Arizona is a quiet, lonely area between Phoenix and Tucson, dotted with small towns but largely isolated, an unforgiving place to be found, especially for someone so young. According to the document, the remains were recovered inside contractor bags, one containing what appeared to be a head and torso and another holding legs. Some parts, including hands and arms, were missing. The memo suggested these remains might belong to Emily Pike, a realization that brought profound sadness and disbelief to all who knew her, underscoring the tragic and cruel turn this case had taken. The community's response was swift and deeply heartfelt. Family members, local advocates, and neighbors turned to social media, uniting behind hashtags like #Justice for Emily Pike to demand transparency and action. It soon became painfully clear that the memo was never intended for public view. Even more concerning, photos showing the exact site where the remains were found circulated online. This unintended exposure risked compromising the scene and potentially derailing the investigation. The grim truth was unavoidable. This was now a homicide case, and leaking such sensitive details might have inadvertently warned those responsible if they were still out there. People's anger grew as they struggled to understand how vital information could have remained hidden for so long from the public. This delay not only weakened confidence in the investigation, but also deepened the emotional wounds for Emily's family and the Indigenous community who mourned alongside them. It highlighted systemic shortcomings in the way these cases are handled, shortcomings that had already caused so much pain. For Emily's family, discovering the possible details of her passing through a leak was a cruel blow, coming after weeks of uncertainty and the initial shock of her disappearance.
Faced with the leak, authorities had little choice but to confirm the discovery. On February 26, 2025, the Gila County Sheriff's Office issued a formal statement identifying the remains as those of an unidentified female. They emphasized that extensive forensic work was still in progress and explained that this necessary analysis was why information had not been shared sooner. Their explanation aimed to clarify the prior silence, though it did little to ease the community's frustration. The statement also revealed close coordination with the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police, further suggesting the remains might belong to Emily. Then on February 27, officials confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The remains were indeed Emily Pike's. Her case was officially classified as a homicide investigation, a solemn acknowledgement of a young life tragically cut short, and the beginning of a difficult search for justice. Emily's story reveals more than sorrow. It uncovers a series of missed opportunities. As the facts come into focus, important questions arise that need thoughtful answers. These are not merely delays or oversights. They reflect deeper issues within the system that allowed a young girl to vanish quietly, only to be discovered when it was already too late. The group home manager agreed to answer questions from True Crime Arizona correspondent Brianna Whitney. Here are some of the key exchanges and my thoughts on them. First, the question, is it required to report a child missing whenever they leave? What is the usual process with law enforcement? The manager replied, yes, every time a child leaves without permission, we have to report them as missing. Most of our reports involve the same child leaving without approval. Then came a critical question. When a child runs away, why don't the staff actively search for them? The answer was, our facility is hands-off. We don't physically intervene unless it's necessary to prevent immediate harm, like if a child runs toward traffic. Usually we call the Mesa police and keep track of the child from a distance until officers arrive. The police respond quickly when a child is in danger. What stands out here is that the question wasn't about physically stopping the child, but about why staff don't search for them after they leave. The hands-off approach makes sense from a policy and safety standpoint, but it can feel deeply frustrating. When a young person walks away, especially in an unfamiliar area, simply following from afar and waiting for police can seem insufficient. It's a difficult balance between respecting boundaries and ensuring safety, And in cases like this, it often feels like the system's safeguards aren't enough to truly protect those who need it most. The question posed was, when a child runs away, why don't staff actively search for them? The emphasis was clearly on searching, not on physical intervention. To me, and feel free to share your thoughts, the response seemed like it skirted around the core of the question without directly addressing it. Next came an important inquiry. Is it true that 30 children have gone missing from the facility, and how many have since been found or returned? The answer given was, no, there are not 30 children currently missing from the home. Every child reported missing has been located. Those who didn't return were transferred to other care settings for various reasons, often because they required a higher level of support. Safety remains our top priority. Then a very significant question. What causes these children to run away in the first place? Are there ways to prevent this from happening? This question hits the heart of the issue. Why do so many children leave this home? The response was, there are many reasons. Some children miss their families, and the state has good systems to allow supervised visits, which we support and try to increase whenever possible. Others miss their friends, struggle with following rules, or have mental health challenges. This makes sense. Young people, especially with their natural impulses and emotional challenges, may run away for many reasons, from longing for familiarity to testing boundaries. But here's the concern. How many children run away? According to records over the past 3 years, there have been more than 80 calls related to this home, with 42 of those involving missing children. That means 30 different children have gone missing from this one facility in that time. I understand that running away is common, but given these numbers, I'm left wondering, what is the average number of runaways from group homes nationwide? Perhaps someone with experience working or living in such facilities, or familiar with the data, can shed light on whether this rate is typical or signals a deeper issue. The next question posed was, do you think the public misunderstands the group home? The response was, yes, many people don't have the full picture. We rely on law enforcement to seek justice for Emily. Our group home invests deeply in the children we care for. We've been operating for 24 years and maintain connections with 95% of former residents. Some of our kids have graduated college, others are still studying or running successful businesses and raising families. We provide parental support not only to the children, but sometimes to their families as well. Our main focus is reuniting children with their families whenever possible. We strive to offer the children the best possible opportunities for a bright future. We aim to create a familiar, stable environment. Vacations, sports, community events, all part of life here. Every child is assigned a mentor. Right now, we're heartbroken. This loss has affected us all deeply. Then came the final question. How long has this group home been operating, and do you primarily serve Native children from reservations? The answer given was, the group home has been open for 24 years. Our founder has 35 years of experience advocating for children and families. We hold multiple contracts and place children in our care when all other options have been exhausted, ensuring their safety. Group homes are not meant as punishment, but as temporary support. We ask the community to allow law enforcement to complete their investigation for Emily's dignity and her family's peace. She deserved better than this. While that's a heartfelt sentiment, and we agree completely, it didn't fully address the question. The query was twofold. How long have you been open? Which they answered. And do you serve all Native children from reservations? Instead, the response circled around the founder's qualifications and the group home's purpose, ending with the brief mention, we have many contracts, and that was it. No further detail on the composition of the children served, leaving the question somewhat open-ended, almost as if dodging the direct answer.
These questions aren't rhetorical. They point to a pattern that explains why Indigenous women vanish at 10 times the national rate, and why cases like Emily's keep happening. The official confirmation of Emily's identity brought with it an overwhelming wave of emotion. Her loved ones and the broader community were met with a sorrow that words couldn't quite hold, and with it, an understandable frustration. The way she was found and the apparent attempts to erase any trace of what had happened left many quietly asking the same question. How could someone carry this out and simply walk away? In the aftermath, an air of unease began to settle, especially among those living in the quiet outskirts where Emily's remains were located. The idea that someone could commit such a heartless act against a young girl led many to question whether they, too, were safe. Conversations began to shift. If this was possible in their own backyard, what else had gone unnoticed? Some even wondered aloud whether this was the work of someone with experience, hinting at the uncomfortable possibility that this may not have been their first time. With the public now fully aware of the situation, pressure began to mount, and the investigation quickly expanded. The 𝐂𝐫𝐜𝐿A County Sheriff's Office remained in charge since the discovery occurred in their area, but they weren't working alone anymore. Federal agencies like the FBI and Bureau of Indian Affairs joined forces, while the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police continued to stay involved, honoring Emily's cultural roots. Sometimes it takes a crowd to get answers, especially when they're long overdue. Meanwhile, attention began turning toward the group home Emily had been placed in. Over the past few weeks, reports surfaced, showing that this wasn't the first time a child had gone missing from that location. In fact, it had reportedly happened dozens of times over just 3 years. People started to wonder, how could such a pattern have been overlooked for so long? When vulnerable children are already navigating hardship, the very places designed to protect them should be doing more than just taking attendance. And this all folds into a broader issue. For years, advocates have pushed for an alert system, similar to Amber Alerts, but specifically designed for Indigenous communities. In theory, it would make it easier and faster to spread awareness when a child goes missing. Emily's uncle later shared that, had such a system been in place, it might have made a difference, a tragic what if that seems to repeat itself far too often, especially when the solutions have already been sitting on someone's desk. Yet amidst this institutional failure, something beautiful happened. Emily's family is heartbroken and demanding answers. Her mother reminded everyone, she was just a baby. At 14, Emily should have been focused on school and friends, not worrying about safety in a place meant to protect her. Her cousins, Jaden and Tyrea, shared a close bond with her. Growing up together on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, they were like siblings. Jaden said Emily was full of energy, loved animals, K-pop, and Roblox. She was planning to come home soon, but never got the chance. Now there's no trio anymore, Jaden said quietly. After her identity was confirmed, emotions ran high. On March 6th, people gathered in Mesa at the last place Emily was seen. Days later, another vigil was held at Apache Gold Casino. These weren't just moments of grief, they were calls for accountability. At the vigil, people shared stories of other missing loved ones. A young girl close to Emily's age held a handmade sign. One woman spoke about her missing cousin, another about her partner. Their pain echoed the same message: this keeps happening. Online, hashtags like #, Justice for Emily, and # No More Stolen Sisters gained momentum. What started as mourning turned into movement. Public pressure grew. Emily's story pushed leaders to pay attention to a crisis long ignored. Now it's our turn to act. What do you think? Was this truly random, or could it have been prevented? Emily deserved safety, and many are left wondering how this happened under professional care. We don't have all the answers, and I won't speculate. But the way this case has been handled raises valid concerns. There's a difference between protecting privacy and avoiding accountability, and people can feel that. Emily wasn't just another case. She was a 14-year-old girl trying to get home. Her story matters, and it deserves attention, not silence. I'll keep following this case and sharing updates as they come. If you want to stay informed, subscribe. And most importantly, take care of yourselves and each other.